We're going to pick up the story in around about 1980, 1981, when the car was found in Southwest Africa, what we now know as Namibia. And Peter Lindenberg, the dream of this car coming to you got a little bit closer. How did it all begin, and what's the story?
So when I was a kid, I was at Car Alarmy when the car debuted. And I never ever, still to this day, never forgotten. This car on the first lap came into Crowthorne, turned into the corner, and Chats and Goff were then just appearing at the Dunlop Bridge. It was gone. And that's the impression I had of the car. And I'd always...
And its sound.
No, it's just unbelievable. And I'd always thought, I'd love to get my hands on that car. And it parked at Basil's place under a carport for years with a cover on it, and then it got sold.
But you were quite close to Basil.
Very close, like super close. I mean, Basil was Paige, our middle daughter's godfather. So the car came to South Africa because the wheels on the car were original GT40 wheels. And David Cohen, who had a GT40, wanted the wheels. So they found the car, they brought it to South Africa. David Cohen got the wheels, and Giorgio Cavalieri got the car. And Giorgio went about getting the car, let's say, back to as close as he could. But the car had come from oval track racing, so the car had been hammered.
I wanted to ask, what was it doing in Southwest Africa at the time, oval racing?
It was doing oval racing. So, and I just went to Giorgio. He'd run it a couple of times at Car Alarmy historic races, and the car wasn't good at all. And I kind of niggled at him. And then I don't remember exactly when in 81, but in 81 I bought the car. And I had it for 34 years or whatever.
You remember writing a check or what you paid for it?
Yeah. It was the biggest check I'd ever written in my life at that point in my life, and it was 102,750 rand. I remember sitting at my desk thinking...
This is in 1981,
1981. And I was thinking, phew, but I was like, you know what? It's the only one. That's it. There ain't going to be another one. So that's where it started with me.
And then what did you do with it?
So we started to work on the car bit by bit, because I'm like, I don't want to mess about with original cars. You've got to try to do your best to keep it where it is, because it tells a story. Yeah. And so we started off by looking at the engine, gearbox, suspension, and just going bit by bit by bit. And then I realized the value of the original gurney motor. And I was like, I'm not going to run this engine. No way. So we took the motor out, we parked the motor, we took a 302, did a reasonable job on a 302. It wasn't crazy, 448 IDAs, and went racing with it.
And where's that original motor and manifold? But there's a story about the manifold I want to get to, but hold on.
That manifold, if you walk down the passage or the corridor, whatever, to Basil's office, and Corey will remember, Basil had a glass cabinet there, and in that glass cabinet was an inlet manifold with 448 IDAs. And Basil gave that to me. And today, that specific manifold with the 448 IDAs is on Paige's Fairlane.
It's bits and pieces of this car. I mean, it's paint and all the body filler and all the rest of it is in a scrap heap somewhere. And last time we saw this car, it looked proper like a racing car. Now it's its bones, its skeleton, its full DNA is in here, and now it can start being brought to life. And like the original bits and pieces, some of them are scattered far and wide.
Yeah, but I mean, there's the original motors around. When I had it, to the best of my knowledge, that was still the original gearbox. It was still the original gearbox. We never messed about with suspension. We never messed about with the brakes. It was the original stuff. It's certainly what it came from Southwest Africa with. That's no question.
And then you started to race it. What did you race it in?
So in those days, it was called, I think, historic saloons. Am I right? Yeah. You were racing some of the stuff back then. And I raced in historic saloons. But I drove this car in a few hundred races.
But and most of them you won?
I won over 100 races in that car.
What is it like to drive? I mean, Bobby Althoff was the only guy to race it in full on Group 5. It was built for him to go and win the South African, I think it was a production or saloon car champion, yeah. It was, and then Group 5 cars, Chevy built a Can-Am for it. This inspired the whole Can-Am thing. I mean, well, what
started that whole South African muscle car V8 story. It was the beginning.
And these were some of, you know, they talk American muscle cars, the Australians. Between this and the Can-Am, they were the finest muscle cars in the world in their period.
Yeah, no. I mean, we got special cars in this country. We had real clever, and we still got real clever people. Yeah.
What is it like to drive?
Yeah, no. It's a once we'd got it sorted, because we had to work a lot on the suspension because it had been oval racing and it had a few bumps. But once we got it right, it was a heck of a. I mean, I did 108s at SWAT Corps in this car.
For a 50 whatever year old car, it's pretty bloody quick.
108's quick. And it's not it wasn't like it's a handful, but it's not a difficult car to drive. It's just a handful.
And reliability, all good?
No, I had very few failures with it. Very few.
What is it like when we sit here, Corey is sitting there, and we know that he put his blood, his heart, his passion, his love into building this thing originally. What is it like just sitting here, you, car, Corey, memories?
Yeah, it's you know, for me, it's really cool because the fact that the car's gonna get call it its next birth. That's effectively what it is. So it'll now be looked after for the next, who knows, 100 years probably.
Can you imagine if humans were like this?
I was just thinking someone could rebuild me like they're rebuilding this. I'd be in good shape.
Got to get sandblasted down to the skeleton first, Peter.
No, it's amazing.
What is there are many memories you've got, 100 races. You raced it for how many years?
So I did race it the first year I got it, but we had problems, overheating problems. But then from 82 onwards, I drove it a lot. I mean, one of my best memories of this car is old Lindenberg track.
That was bumpy as hell. If you missed the thing at the end, you ended up on the main road.
That's it. And the rolling, there was a rolling start, and you came up from the bottom, so where the main road was, the fence was right next to the track, and you come up the hill to the start. And it was a guy called Johan van Heerden. I remember Johan van Heerden. His Porsche is now Andre Bezuidenhout's Porsche, the one that's with the windmills turbocharged on it. And he was on pole and I was second, and I was like, but it was close. And I was like, you know what? If I don't get this through that long first turn, remember that long first turn? If I don't get in through there, that's me done. And I thought, this is it. And I literally drove around his outside on that whole turn the whole way with this thing sideways, the whole way. And I got out the corner in front of him and I won the race.
But I suppose this thing on cold tires was a little bit more driver-friendly than a Porsche with its engine out the back on a cold
question. He had to get out the gas, and I could keep going. But I mean, I won everywhere. I won in East London, you name it.
What is the top speed of this thing? I mean, East London, a lot.
No idea, but it's bloody fast. That's for sure. This thing was quick.
And brakes? Because it had
So I did a race once, and I'm trying to think who, we shared the car. And I'm trying to think who it was. And we did it was an hour and a half race, I think, 90 minutes. And we won. I'm just trying to think who, because I had a few guys that shared with me. Anyway, when we got out, the race was over and we were talking, he said to me, Al, I really enjoyed that. He said, but man, he says, you've got to send a fax to the brakes to tell them the corner's coming. I mean, but the front calipers are tiny. They're tiny.
I mean, I was also at Kyalami, 1970, Crowthorne, and remember that. And just to see some of the bits and pieces. You know, when the car's covered up in paint, you look at pictures of the time and it looks a little bit different. And then you see when all the paint is off, you can see the marks on the roll cage. And when you got the car back from Namibia, it didn't have that diagonal.
No, definitely not. I never touched the roll cage or anything. The structure of the car we never fiddled with. Nothing.
But so you fiddled with the motor, got it running. Yeah. Why couldn't Giorgio get it running clearly?
I have no idea. So I think he was struggling with the overheating with that Gurney Westlake motor. And we also struggled, as I said earlier, with a bit of on the overheating. And then we decided, you know what, forget it. Let's just mothball that engine because when I started to find out about what this costs, what that costs, I was like, I'm not buying this car to park it. I'm buying this car to race it. And no way I'm going to go and run that motor. So that's why, we went away from that and did the.
It's important to, we sit and we look at another car pass through your hand. Then we've got to talk about this Lindenberg thing going on here. But to park a car that is good to race it's a crime against the petrol heads.
Well, I think you get two kinds of people. You get collectors, and then you get enthusiastic collectors. Enthusiastic collectors are prepared to take their car and go and drive it and race it. And if something goes wrong, you'll sort it out. But a lot of collectors buy race cars and they literally just park them. I mean, I could never do that, not a chance. Every car I had, basically. The only race car that I owned that I never went out and really hammered was the M10B McLaren, because I had Kip Ackerman's car. That's the only car that I ever owned that I didn't race.
Now, where's that car now?
It went to New Zealand. The chassis number 8. And it was the only McLaren N10B built with a fuel tank that went over the driver's legs. I mean, it was like driving a mobile petrol bomb.
It's stupid in some of those sports cars they did at the time.
That was a Formula 5000. M10B, Formula 5000.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But even you look at this car now, they're clubmen's cars that are racing with a more substantial cage in it. But at the time, this was state of the art. This was world class stuff.
No, and also you've got to remember, like front suspension that Basil got from the GT40.
So that
story. Yeah. He went to Holman and Moody in America, and they were actually trashing the rest of the old GT40s that they didn't want to use anymore. And they were literally cutting them up. And the suspension was taken from a GT40. Basil went to America to Holman and Moody, and he bought the suspension, the wheels, the engine, all that stuff from Holman and Moody to build this car.
And that's why we've got all this plate and the building stuff in here to put the double arms in.
Corey's the guy to tell you, because he did most of it.
We spoke to Corey. We're going to still talk to him again. And I find it, I might have said it before, we hear, it's almost as this is the real beginning, and there's a bucket load of work to do on this car.
Yeah, there's a bucket load of work, but there's a bucket load of pleasure down the road. It's about return on investment. You're going to invest the time and everything to do it right. You're going to end up with a seriously good car. And it's the only one in the world. That's it. Finished. Doesn't matter what anyone says. This is it, the only one.
While you're just talking, in my mind, the movies in the mind, I can just picture Bobby Althoff in the car there with the way he sat in the car and racing it. And these are the memories and the pleasure, the joy, the stuff that gives me goosebumps. Yeah. Other story about this car. Around the tight stuff, what was it like?
No, pretty good. I mean, this thing can turn in. Don't worry. You can turn. I mean, again, go back to the times it did at the tracks when I raced it. Just take Swartkorps. A 108 in Swartkorps in most cars is pretty quick. Yeah. Especially a car that's, 50-something years old. Is it? Yeah, what's it? Yeah, it's 52 years old.
What is the biggest, life's about pain and pleasure. And we've spoken a lot about the pleasure. What was the biggest pain this thing gave you?
When I had to sell it, because I had to sell it.
And tell me, why did you have to sell it, and what was the process you went through?
So the bottom line is I got hooked by a guy, financially big time, and I was left with no options. And in fact, that's when I sold. I had Ian Schechter's B25 Chevron. I had this. I had the Peter Goff Y151, and I had the A3, the second of the V8 Sierras.
And that must, to race drivers do what they have to do to race again. But it must have been like ripping your heart out to send these precious cars that you loved, send them off to new owners.
This one was the most difficult car to sell of the whole lot, because I'd had it for so long. I mean, I don't think my kids knew of any time in their childhood when we didn't have this car, because I had this car before they were born. That's it.
And who did it go to, and did you at least recover your 102,000 rand?
Yeah, I made a whacking profit like Franco will make on it one day. So I sold it to Lee Scribanti, to Franco's uncle. Yeah,
And here we are a couple of years later.
amazing. It's fantastic.
Peter, there's going to be a time, it's going to take a few months, when this thing goes out to the racetrack for that initial shakedown, that first test. But before then, that period when a racing car comes alive, when the motor first fires up in a new build and it gives birth, you've got to be here to get the goosebumps.
Yeah, no. It's just like, it's amazing. For me, it's just like, wow. I love this thing.
I can see the emotion in your eyes. There must be a lot of dust in the air here, guys. We've got to do something about the air quality. Peter Lindenberg, from the bottom of my heart and from the depths of the inner bits of steel of this motor car, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here, and thank you for agreeing to be part of the rebirth of Z181, the only Ford Capri Perana V8 Group 5 race car in the world. Thank you.
Sure, it was fantastic. And I know Franco will do it right.
You sure will.